This is Rogers TV.
Focused on quality and convenience, there isn't much you won't find at Marie's Mini Mart. Home-style breads, sandwiches, plus a variety of artisan breads and delicious single-serve desserts available exclusively at our Frecker Drive location. Marie's Mini Mart, with 25 locations wherever you go, there we are.
Hello, I'm Karl Wells. This is Point2Point. My guest is Bob Hallett. If I were to really give him his due in this introduction, I'd be talking for the next 30 minutes, but since we don't have that kind of time, suffice to say that Bob was a founding member of Great Big Sea and performed with that excellent band until its very final gig. And it's great to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, now let's get to it. Where were you born?
In St. John's,
Okay.
St. Clair's Hospital.
And you grew up here in St. John's. What was your family life like when you were growing up? Tell me about your mom and dad and your siblings.
Yeah, I was surrounded by interesting people and surrounded by music. My parents were probably smarter than their jobs, and they were also people who, you know, for the time were fairly worldly. And we went to see theater, and we went, you know, they read books, and we went to the library. I actually grew up on the edge of Kilbride, which is a very distinctive neighborhood then. Now it's been subsumed by St. John's, but then it still had vestiges of the sort of Irish Catholic people who'd settled that place in the late 1700s. And, you know, I grew up in an interesting family where music was part of the daily life, in the way that the laundry and the cooking and the walking of the dog were part of the daily life. And instruments were around, and there was just great opportunities to learn and to partake. Both my parents had huge extended families who would sort of drift in and out of our lives at regular basis. So it was a busy household with lots of activity and lots of conversation, and lots of ideas.
What was the first musical instrument you learned to play, Bob?
I learned to play like band instruments in the school band when I was, you know, probably grade 5, grade 6. But around the same time, I was picking things up that were in the house and teaching myself to play. Like, I've never really taken any music lessons. But I suppose the first traditional music instrument I really learned to play properly was a tin whistle, because it's the simplest and it's the cheapest. And it doesn't require a ton of, it requires great technique, but it doesn't require any great physical effort. You know, to learn the guitar, your fingers have to adjust to the strings. You got to develop strength in your fingers. The violin is a very counterintuitive pose, you know, with the bow and the neck and the arm and all that, where the tin whistle it's a stick of tin with 6 holes, you know. It's not, It's not in itself difficult. It can be immensely beautiful and complex, but it's easy to learn. So that's where I started.
I've always been fascinated by people who play multiple instruments, as you do. I don't know how many you play by now, but it must be half a dozen, is it?
I'd say probably there's a dozen that I can play well.
A dozen?
And there's at least another dozen that I could function on.
So, just to go back now, you went to Memorial and studied English and history. When you left Memorial with your degrees, or your degree, what was you had in mind in terms of career aspirations?
I don't know if I had anything in mind. I mean, you know, doing a BA didn't give you a trade.
Yeah.
It didn't give you an obvious career path. It's certainly less now than it did then.
Yeah, I tacked on a Bachelor of Education, so just so I'd have that in my back
insurance,
pocket. Right?
You never know, right? The thing for me was I wanted to do stuff. I wanted to be out there in the world. I wanted to challenge myself, and I wanted to do interesting things. So that was always my career path. And the job or the career or the company, I never worried about, not that I didn't worry about it, you know, I needed to pay my rent, but I was always more focused on what's next, what thing can I do. So at the time, journalism was actually a career path in Newfoundland. Now it's, you know, it's an affectation or a hobby, I think, but then it looked like something viable to do. So, and I had been editor of the Muse, the Memorial newspaper at the day, and I'd done lots of...
You're jumping ahead now, because we need to explain.
Okay,
you actually became, after university, you became the managing editor of the Newfoundland Herald.
Well, there was definitely a few zigzags in between,
Yeah.
but I eventually ended up there. Yeah.
So here you are. You're like a kid, basically, I suppose. You weren't very old, right?
No.
No. So you're managing editor of the Newfoundland Herald, and at that time, I suspect it had a healthy circulation.
When I left in, it had the highest I got it. I realized that there was a gap. Finding gaps has been a career path for me, but I realized there was a gap between what it was doing and what it could have been or should have been doing. So when I, sort of became the managing editor, I had my salary tied to circulation, and I managed to get up to, I think it was $52,000 a week at that stage, which would be astronomical now, but at the time that was.
Let me guess that
pretty high.
wasn't your idea to have your salary tied to circulation.
Oh, that was my idea.
Oh, was it your idea?
Yeah, it was.
Okay.
I knew there was a lot of potential.
Okay.
And also knew we were going to do things that was going to, I knew we were going to boost it, but so I felt fairly confident that was going to work.
Okay. So I was going to ask, did you make any changes to the magazine itself?
Well, in my period, we got rid of some of the crazier stuff, which was an uphill battle because Jeff Sterling, owned it, and he took a great personal interest in the Herald. But Jeff is sort of a legendary figure of great eccentricity. But I liked him, and I loved his enthusiasm.
So you, after the Herald, I guess it was Darrell Power, Sean McCann, yourself. You were Rankin Street.
No, that was all at the same time.
All at the same time?
Yeah, all that happened at the same time.
So you were performing and editing the Herald.
Yeah, at one stage I was at one stage I would, we would have to do print runs on Thursday night at midnight in order to have it, because they sort of printed all week and then distributed on Sunday night for, Monday morning. And I would have to go inspect the first print run, particularly if something wasn't going right or wasn't questionable. So I would time my sets with Rankin Street. And I would leave the bar at midnight, get in my car, drive all the way to Logie Bay Road, like, that's right, that's wrong, this is right, this is wrong, just things like that. I'd get in my car and race back downtown and play like the third set. And the guys would be like, we got to do an encore.
Things you do when you're young, eh?
Yeah, I had many nights, many days I would leave the bar at 3 o'clock and I'd be at my desk at 6.
Yeah.
And then I'd find myself, falling asleep at stoplights and things like that.
Well, I suspect you're probably, knowing you're probably just as busy today, but getting back to Rankin Street, at some point, Alan Doyle joined Rankin Street, and then you became Great Big C.
Well, that was a fixed and decisive moment for us, for me and Sean McCann and Darrell Power, because we had done Rankin Street for 4 or 5 years. Yeah. And kind of, it was just sort of this drunken ramble through the pubs of St. John's. And we learned a lot. We learned how to perform. We already kind of knew how to play, but we learned how to perform at Rankin Street. And the thing that we had, that we were able to carry forward, was that, young bands today might play 10 gigs and then they have to go do something important, where we played hundreds. And a lot of gigs we did were horrible. The sound was bad and people didn't like us and we forgot stuff, or people showed up drunk, an ex-girlfriend was in the front crying, like big drama all the time. So by the time we, after 4 years of that, we're like, okay, this vehicle is too slipshod and too messy, and none of us is really a lead singer, so we need another guy. And then we're going to stop this thing, we're going to rename it, rebrand it. We sat down, did a 2-year business plan, and the phrase branding wasn't used then the way it is now, in the early 1990s, but we were very thoughtful about, okay, we need to create a vehicle that has potential here, and Rankin Street is not that. So we played our last gig, told everyone this is it, and then we took 3 months, learned a whole new repertoire. Alan Doyle joined the three of us. We became a foursome, and we released the first record. And we did all that in this one sort of 4-month period, and then we started playing concerts again.
So had Alan Doyle been performing with another group prior to?
He was doing solo stuff, and we'd seen him in playing by himself in a bar. And I mean, Alan then was Alan now. It was just this volcano of energy kind of going around us in circles. But he didn't really have any show or any repertoire. He was just standing on his head to entertain people. So, and we had that. We had an idea, and a really clear idea, and a really clear sense, okay, we're going to take traditional music and we're going to take acoustic pop, we're going to put them together, and we're going to be this kind of band. And we're going to go play concerts all over the world, and this is how we're going to do it. And that was really attractive to Alan, because he wanted that like he wanted nothing else. But he had no idea how to do it, and we did. I mean, I remember going to see Alan, and we'd go sit in the back and watch him go, is he the guy? Maybe, what about that guy? It was a real thoughtful process. And fortunately, we became great friends. But it was a conscious effort on our part to create a band that could do this for a life.
Yeah. You guys, maybe you too, you especially, were more interested in the business side of things.
Well, definitely, I was interested in the business. I don't remember Alan asking any questions about the business.
Yeah.
But what Alan did bring was he was a lead singer. You know, he had that kind of power in his voice that could stand up to what we were doing. And we knew we needed another guy. I mean, the three of us sang, but Alan, you know, took over a big chunk of that and made it possible for us to do more interesting things musically. He played guitar well, better than any of us.
Yeah.
And he lied and said he had a van and a PA, which turned out to be not true. But we got along too. You know, very quickly we became good friends, and that was huge.
Now, your first gig was at Munn, and you opened for the Irish Descendants.
Yes.
How did you pick your music for that first show? And were you doing all your own material then, or?
No, it was very little thought went into that one because we talked about doing this band, and we'd broken our brother one. But I was actually living in Toronto. I was playing with Kim Stockwood's band,
wow.
And I'd left the Herald at that point in time and was just playing with a bunch of people in Toronto. And Sean called and said, you know, the thing with Alan, I think it's going to happen. We got this opening gig, and we'll do a few gigs after it. You know, can you come down and do these gigs? And I had a show with Kim Stockwood on Sunday night, and then I had to go back to my apartment and get our stuff, my gear and all that, and then I had to drive to St. John's. So I didn't leave Toronto between the jigs and the reels till like Tuesday lunchtime, and I had to be in St. John's. That gig was on a Thursday night in opening for the Irish Descendants. So I drove from Toronto to St. John's in 2 days. And I had no rehearsal at all, so whatever the sound check was that day, that was a rehearsal.
So at what point did you realize that, you know, we can make a good living at this? We don't have to do anything else. We can just focus on this band, and we can make a living. And was that decision based solely on the kind of revenue you were making in Newfoundland, or?
No, I mean, we didn't make any money at all for the first few years. I mean, the contrary to popular belief, it wasn't a rocket out of the gate. I mean, we always survived in Newfoundland. We got good gigs because we were a good live band.
Yeah.
And the live music scene in Newfoundland was much, much healthier then because there was a lot more young people here. But that wasn't enough to sustain anything, you know, so we knew we needed to get on the mainland. And that certainly didn't happen for us overnight. I mean, we did a lot of tours and worked our asses off for 2 years. The big sort of aha moment financially was getting signed to Warner Music Canada. Not because they paid us any money, you know, we didn't get our first check from them until probably 1998, but they funded making records and videos, things that we would never have been able to afford on our own. And it allowed us to record at a quality that got us on the radio and got us on TV. And that was kind of the point where we went from, you know, in 1993, my tax return was $3,800. In 1994, it was $3,600. You know, we were living very, very hand-to-mouth, you know, staying with family and that kind of sleeping on couches for almost 3 years. But we were always building audience. So in order to keep building that audience, we sacrificed financially. Rather than going back to St. John's and taking easy money, we would drive to Calgary and play for nothing, you know?
Yeah.
And we did that and literally we paid the crew, we paid the van, we paid everybody, and we'd take nothing. And we did that night after night after night for 4 years.
And of course, Warner's had a big marketing organization.
Yeah, well, then the music business in Canada had the marketing muscle to make rock stars.
Yeah.
You know, they don't now. They don't. They've eviscerated themselves, you know, for many reasons. But at that time, they were very powerful entities. And if they really got behind you, but again, even then, you know, Great Big Sea wasn't a huge success out of the gate. I mean, Up, that first record, became a sort of a Canadian iconic album. But the year it came out, it took 16 months to go gold. And gold was only 50,000 copies then, you know. So that was a long time of you know, a real slog for us. The first 3 videos that are, you know, considered so iconic now, Run, Run Away and Mary Mac and Going Up, none of them went into rotation on Much Music. You know, none of those songs made it onto the charts in Canadian radio. Our first honest-to-God Canadian hit was When I'm Up, I Can't Get Down. That didn't come out till late 1997.
Right.
So, you know, that process of rocket to the top, it kind of happened in Newfoundland. You know, it was around the cover of the Herald, and we did things in Newfoundland. But in terms of actually getting to a point where it was financially sustainable, that took about 5 years.
Wow. Did you all Did you write collectively, or did you individually write your own songs, or
Not
did you
much
all write?
Darryl never wrote in a significant fashion ever. You know, he has subsequently, but not during the band's period.
Yeah.
There was very little collective writing until much later. What would tend to happen was people would have 3/4 of a song, and in the interest of getting it done or getting other people behind it, would engage somebody, because there was always a lot of competition for within the band for, you know, songs and the best song and the best idea and the best everything. You know, we were very competitive guys even now. So that kind of interactive thing, you know, when you see the Beatles, everyone sitting down at the piano, that didn't happen for us until much later. You know, well into the first record where there was anything really like that would have been Sea of No Cares, which was 2002. You know, which was 9 years after that, after the first record.
Eventually, you had to, I guess you got to the point where you had to add management and a road crew and all that.
If you're any good, managers are not difficult to find. But Louis Thomas, who was the manager of the band, the only manager for the entire run of the career, he's still Alan's manager, my manager. I mean, Louis was a guy that we knew. He'd been in the Thomas Trio, which before Great Big Sea was probably the most successful Newfoundland pop band anyway. And he was working as an agent in Toronto when we first started traveling there, and we were friends. You know, Louis grew up in my neighborhood. You know, we'd known each other since we were kids. So there was a big trust factor. We knew Louis had a lot more sort of technical knowledge than we did. Louis, I don't think he was ever a fan of the band, but Louis really appreciated our work ethic and our organization.
Of all the places you played, I mean, you did Europe, the States, Canada. Was there a gig that sort of stood out?
I've asked to answer that question a lot, and I've been asked it a lot, and I never really have a very good answer, because the best gig was the next one.
Yeah.
It was never,
Yeah.
I don't look behind me that much. You know, I'm always trying to seek for the next thing. And, you know, the great gig lived in the hearts and the minds of people that were there. Our job was to get out and deliver at 110% every night. And I honestly didn't give a shit where that was. You know, I was happy to have an opportunity to do this.
Yeah.
And the great gig was often a function of how the audience reacted, not where we were. And, you know, sometimes I was Tuesday in Wichita, sometimes I was in front of 30,000 people in a football stadium. But that reaction was what we were always looking for. And, you know, the skill of that job, what we did so well, was doing the same thing every night. Not playing the same show note for note, but being able to go out in front of an audience and have them react the same way every night, to have them transported for an evening. Yeah. That was our goal. So, you know, an individual gig was never about us. It was always about them. And the skill of that job really is, you know, I've said it to young bands all the time. You have to go out there with the idea that it might be, you know, not Friday night for you, but it's Friday night for them.
That's right.
They've gotten a babysitter, or they drove, they parked, they've been looking excited about this gig for months. And the fact that it's night 17 of 38 for you doesn't matter. For them, this is the biggest night of the year. And you've got to walk out there and deliver that experience for them. And that's what's important, not where you are and who you are.
Something I've always been curious about, is it true that you were asked to play the Canada Day concert on Parliament Hill, and the producers wanted you guys to come out wearing sou'westers and in a dory, and you refused to perform?
Yeah, well, what happened was, and that story has gotten, again, because it was kind of a moving battle that took place over 48 hours. You know, it wasn't sort of one argument. But we were hired to play on Canada Day. I think this was in 1998. And it was kind of the peak of the band's pop stardom year. It was the year, you know, Up had sold 500,000 copies, and we were a big Canadian band. And the Bare Naked Ladies were on that bill, and other sort of typical kind of Canadian, the sort of thing that plays on Parliament Hill. And everyone was supposed to do something cliched in that real CBC Tommy Hunter way. And the decision was, we were told like an hour before the sound check, the guy came around with these sou'westers and was like, here's your costume. We're like, there's no costume, you know, what are you talking about? And he said, well, we got this dory, you know, you guys are gonna, everyone puts on, you're gonna pretend to row, and you're gonna go out on stage that way, and you're gonna climb out and play your song. We're like, we're not doing that. That's stupid, we're gonna look like idiots, we're not doing it. And rather than everybody kind of acquiescing, instead we got a tremendous pushback from the producers. And you know, there was you know, phone calls to Toronto and arguments, and it got more and more heated, and in the crux of all that, there was, a reporter hanging around from, I think it was the Ottawa Citizen, who, got wind there was an argument, and I said it, but I didn't say it in print, Alan did, but he said, a joke we made, I said, would they expect Van Morrison to go out wearing a leprechaun costume? And Alan said it to the reporter, because we were really angry after, just taking all kinds of abuse for 2 days. And that got printed in the paper, and of course that went everywhere, because it was a pretty provocative remark. And the CBC backed down, but we were a public enemy #1 in the National Corporation for a long time. We took a beating for that one.
Just out of curiosity, how do you feel about the word Newfie?
It was never one I've embraced, because too often I heard it used with contempt. Over the years, I've decided to become agnostic on it. It's one of those things that it's not the word I would use to describe myself. On the other hand, I can't denigrate other people who are comfortable with it. So my current position is I'm a Newfie atheist. I don't hear it anymore. I'm not arguing about it. I'm not talking about it. It's like, okay, whatever. That's my current position on it.
Is there any possibility that Great Big Sea might get back together for a reunion concert or anything like that?
I mean, the last concert we played was on New Year's Eve in 2013, and that was not the intention of anybody involved, I suppose, other than Sean McCann, for that to be the last concert. And certainly that wasn't our thought process then or now, really. So, the band never broke up. Sean quit and has immersed us in legal turmoil ever since. So the other people the cast and crew of Great Big Sea have never really, it's not like we all said, oh, that's it, the band's broken up or we've retired. We've clung on to the idea that we will play again at some point in time. So I don't know when, but it was never our intention not to play concerts together as Great Big Sea ever again, and that intention has not changed.
Bob, you're involved with the musical Come From Away, which turned out to be a spectacular success. I know you thought it was a good show, but did you realize that it was going to become the phenomenon that it became?
I don't think anybody involved in that knew it was going to become the phenomenon that it became. And certainly my involvement was quite early, when it was still very much a, kind of post-workshop. And that was before they'd even debuted in La Jolla in California almost 4 years ago now. And I was brought in really because they were struggling to find a way to marry the Newfoundland side of it with the kind of Broadway aspirations that the show had, because it really is, that show it's written about Newfoundland, but certainly not written by Newfoundlanders, and they were trying to find a way to just get those two halves to work together. And they knew they didn't want it to sound like, Riverdance or the Irish Rovers. They wanted to have the sort of Newfoundland side of that show to have a very authentic feel.
And there is a Newfoundland musical touring called No Change in the Weather?
That's correct. And so No Change in the Weather is about combining some of the best songs in the Newfoundland songbook. It's a bit pejorative, but the term jukebox musical is what it is, in the way that Mamma Mia takes a disparate group of songs and then they wrote a story around it. That's what we did with this music. And the story is designed it all takes place on the night of a wake in a Newfoundland family, where a family that's fallen apart. The winds of change and financial trouble and history that have buffeted Newfoundland for the last 30 years have all come to root in this family. And they've gathered together for a wake for the family matriarch to settle the scores. The prodigal sons have returned, and the feuds are going to be settled, emotions are going to be expressed. And like all great Newfoundland wakes, there's sadness, but there's also laughter and joy and change. And this show is designed to be very, very entertaining, but also get people thinking about where we are and who we are in Newfoundland right now.
One thing which you've done, which you're very good at, is writing. You wrote a memoir, you've written a couple of books for younger readers, and you wrote, I guess, what would be a manual for how to manage your career in the music business. Is that something you'd like to do more of?
Well, I've never stopped doing it. I still write some articles now and again for Newfoundland Quarterly, and I've often done sort of minor writing, publicity and things like that. So it's not a skill I've ever really entirely lapsed on. I'm interested in doing the most interesting thing I can. And if that's writing a book or writing a song or playing a show or producing a musical, that's what I want to do.
So for a while, you were involved in the restaurant business. You operated a restaurant, Tavola. You're, I guess, part owner in a club downtown. The restaurant closed. I was wondering, after that experience, do you have any thoughts on the restaurant business you'd like to share?
Well, running a restaurant in St. John's, this is not the golden age of that for sure. Tavola was fun and it was interesting and I learned a lot, but it was also tremendously time consuming. And it was a level of consumption that I couldn't sustain and do anything else really, particularly the last couple of years. And so, because anything I do, I want to be hands-on, I want to be involved. But running a restaurant, you really need to be in the kitchen every day, or you need to be working the front of house every day, and I couldn't realistically do either of those jobs and do anything else. So when an opportunity came along to lease that space to a young chef and his spouse who were really excited and really wanted that space and, were able to take advantage of it in a way that was impossible for me, I jumped at the chance to just do something different. Running a restaurant was something I always wanted to do. I gave it 5 years, but at the end of that, I was like, okay, what's next? Mm.
And Aaron's Pub is still going strong.
Yeah, Aaron's Pub, my pub is still on the go, and it's so my time, I own that in total now. My thing is about making it a community space as much as a pub, making it a place where Newfoundland music and traditional music and folk music is cherished. So we worked really hard to make it a bit more experiential. Bring people into not just to sit there and drink beer and watch people, but to be part of it.
I know you've got a nice little performance area.
Yeah,
there.
we've got a bunch of different things now that happen where they're a bit more interactive. So we have a slow session, for example, which is all about teaching. We have a storyteller night where people tell stories. We have a bluegrass night where people are kind of off the radar, get up and play, and it's all about just blurring that line between stage and audience until there is no line at all.
Well, on that note.
There we go.
I think we will end our conversation
right on
with Bob Hallett. Thanks so much for doing the show, Bob.
That was a pleasure. Thank you.
It's been a real pleasure chatting with you today.
Yeah, no problem.
And that is this edition of Point to Point.